This episode reframes belonging as the lived outcome of strategic inclusion and authentic leadership. Dr. Bennett-Alexander offers language, perspective, and lived wisdom that helps leaders move beyond compliance toward cultures where people feel seen, respected, valued in everyday moments. Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an innovation, unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing that you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. Our conversations go from the boardrooms to the break rooms, from the sidewalks to our living rooms, from our relationships to ourselves. We explore the full spectrum of belonging, the joy of being seen, the pain of being left out, and the courage it takes to build spaces where every identity is welcomed, valued, and loved. We also hold space for each of our unique identities to joyfully prosper and thrive. I am your host, Christopher Bylone, someone who believes knowing you belong is a birthright. Welcome back to the show. Our guest does not just believe in belonging. She has been documenting it, teaching it, baking it, stitching it, planting it, and living it for most of her life. Dr. Dawn D. Bennett-Alexander is a legal scholar, culture shaper, and an unapologetic truth teller whose career spans the White House, Capitol Hill, the Department of Justice, the FTC, and the Federal Labor Relations Authority, along with a historic first clerkship under Judge Julia Cooper Mack in Washington, as Judge Mack became the first Black woman in the U.S. to be appointed to a jurisdiction's highest court. Dr. B.A., as she is called, spent 40 years as a professor, created the first employment law course for colleges of business, co-authored the foundational textbook in the field, now in its 11th edition, and it's still #1 worldwide, and helps turn employment law into a global discipline taught across continents. And if that was not enough, she has also helped to create the international DEIB standard now adopted by more than 160 countries. Now here's where it gets even better. After retiring, Dr. B.A. did not slow down. She wrote a cozy mystery series that is belonging infused, where a quilt does mysterious things and teaches readers about equity, identity, and history along the way. She is a prize-winning bread maker, avid quilter, knitter, crocheter, gardener, wool spinner, and a lifelong journal keeper since age 11. She is the mother of 3 daughters, the grandmother of 2, a boy and a girl. She is loved deeply and authentically, married twice to men, and in her longest relationship, shared 15 years with a woman, back when same-sex marriage was not even legal. Dr. B.A. lives her values, both intellect and heart, believing that justice is learned not only in courtrooms and in classrooms, through stories, relationships, and the things we make with our hands. Dr. Dawn D. Bennett-Alexander, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate it. What a great introduction. And I love it that you brought sort of all the pieces of me to it instead of just what I do for the world for DEIB.
I mean, we all are humans, right? And how we show up to this conversation, the workplace, our daily lives is every facet of who we are, right?
Absolutely.
I think we need to remind people that there are human beings, one on the other side of the screen, but also the folks who are in positions of power are human too. And so we all walk a different journey to get where we are today. And we can't leave any of those identities at the door or even leave our work identity at work when we go home, right? So everything makes us who we are.
Absolutely.
And that's what adds to this richness of diversity.
Very much so.
Alrighty, let's get this conversation started.
Okay.
So you have lived multiple careers from the White House to Capitol Hill to academia on the global stage. When people meet you for the first time, what do you most want them to understand about you beyond the resume?
walk the walk. I try to always walk the walk that it's all about love. So
Mm.
even if I never say those words to you, I want you to be able to feel that from me in whatever interaction we have, whether you're serving me in a restaurant, whether I'm speaking before we have a big to do where I'm the featured speaker. I want you to feel that from me.
Walk the love. That is so really important. I think we've lost a little bit of that in the last many years, and hopefully we can get back to it. So thank you for that. So you are a prize-winning bread maker, an avid maker, quilting, knitting, crocheting, gardening. What do your hands teach you about justice, patience, and belonging?
My gosh, I love it that you connected them because to me, they really are all a part of it. Everything I do is sort of an extension of what it is that I believe. And quilting is probably the biggest one for me. They all teach me incredible
Mm,
patience. They all teach me to think about things in long terms. You don't plant a garden without being someone who's hopeful and someone who is optimistic. You believe that if you plant that seed, that something beautiful or something that you can put in your mouth is going to come out of it at some point. And that process of patience gives you a way of looking at the world that's quite different. You don't get quite as caught up in the minute by minute things that happen during a day. You take a longer view of it. And with quilting, I say that quilting keeps me sane. And I believe that it was a gift, a
mm,
tool that was given to me to come here to do what it is that I was supposed to do on earth. And teaching so many others about the things that I learn in the process of just working with my hands on a quilt. Quilting, like gardening, is something you have to have patience for. And I do hand quilting. So we're not
mm,
talking about quickly running something up on a machine and having something beautiful to look at. I know every stitch of what
mm.
it is I have laying on that bed or whatever you're wrapped up in. I have put every stitch there with my hands. I have looked at every single stitch to say, should I keep this here or should I take it out? And I have also learned, and this is a really important one, the importance of pieces that don't seem to fit together that do and end
Mm.
up creating a huge, big, wonderful, warm, comfortable whole. And I've also learned how just that process teaches you so much because very often, and you know this from the work that you do, Christopher, we think that things don't necessarily go together, or people think they don't necessarily go together. And we're here to tell them they may look like they don't fit, but they really do. And not only do they fit, but you'll love the final product that comes out of it. That seems like really you're getting all of that out of quilting, but it's true for me. And I apply it so much in my everyday life, so much in my everyday life.
Yeah, I think about the phrase I use with managers is about what is the value add, not what is the culture fit. And I think about that was reminding me about what is the value add to that quilt. I'm a gardener myself. And so, raised on a farm, right? You can take the farmer off the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the farmer. And so for me, I'm always thinking about how different flowers or different plants, will go together. And a lot of people, when you're planting a garden, a vegetable garden, a lot of people don't realize that there are a number of flowers that you can use as pest prevention. And I can remember telling some friends, hey, if you want to protect your garden, plant some marigolds.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't know that that is the value add that that plant is going to bring, that marigold is going to bring to your garden, you would never have planted it. And so, how do we continue to talk about the value add that things bring to a situation that most people wouldn't have thought about?
Yeah. Or to even have people view and think about this, Christopher, as a gardener. You have some dirt. Who thinks about dirt? You've got seeds or bulbs or pieces that you put in. You look at them, it's like, whatever. What's that seed going to do? And look what you end up getting. So the
Yes.
idea of looking at people thinking they have no value, but then when you put them together in the right circumstances, you get something extraordinary. And I'm telling you, I'm 75 years old and I'm still thrilled by the idea that I can put something in the ground like a seed. That's the teeniest little thing. And out will come this beautiful thing that you would never have thought about looking at that seed. That's a lot we can learn from just something as simple as a seed or gardening. And it
Yeah,
applies to life.
it does. And I think about in this moment just about everything that's going on, not just in the United States, but around the world. There's this meme that continuing pop up every now and then, especially in the springtime, that says, they tried to bury us, little did they know we were seeds.
Love that. I remember the first time I ever saw that. And I thought, yes, that is so awesome. I love it.
Right, right. So little did they know that we were seeds because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you have told me that you have been journaling since the age of 11. If
Yeah.
the journal could talk,
Yeah.
what would it say is your through line in your life?
It probably would say that without thinking about it, I don't think she understands how much she is unwilling to not stand up when she thinks it's important to do so, from the
Mm,
smallest thing to the largest thing. And I use journal as sort of a head dump to process things that ordinarily you might not have a conversation about, or just maybe an idea in your head. And it took me probably until my 70s to realize, you go through the world as kind of this earth mother, and you really, I mean, that really is who you are, both with people as well as things like plants, and you care about them. But the truth is, you're so strong. You refuse to take stuff that does not sit well with you. And I
mm-mm.
just never thought about it that way. I still don't think about it that way as I'm going through it. It just seems like, well, this is the right thing to do. This just makes sense, right? And it's like, do you realize most people don't do this? You do realize that, don't you? And it's like, well, how could they not? It's just, it's not right. How can I be okay with letting it go? But that's, my journal show. That's a through line for me.
Oh, beautiful. And you are strong. I mean, we don't need to remind you, but
Oh, yeah,
thank you.
because I
Well, we
don't.
probably do. We probably do. But, thank you for the work that you have done because you have laid a trail for us to be able to come behind you and do even more things. So thank you for being that person who blazed some of those trails for us because we would not be able to do the work we're doing now if it wasn't for the work that you have done before us. So I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, be able to have this conversation.
I appreciate it. I really do.
Okay, so we on this show we talk about names. So who are the people in your life, mentors, ancestors, teachers, or chosen family, whose names and lessons do you carry into every room with you?
A lot of them are unnamed because a big piece is my ancestors.
Mm,
And they came to me really early. And I think probably before I realized it was them, I thought about things sort of in a broader terms. And that was probably around the age of 11. And it's interesting how, to me, the universe sends you what you need when you need it as you
mhm,
can accept it. And the summer I went from elementary school to middle school, my parents got a letter saying that I grew up in Washington, D.C., saying that I was going to be in the honors section. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it made my parents very happy.
mm,
And the one sort of thought I had about that was something is at work in my life in a really significant way, and I know nothing about it. And that was sort of one of those things that even at 11, as a kid who was still playing with dolls at the time, I thought maybe I need to tuck that away and just kind of keep it in my head somewhere. And the next year, I was standing in the library in DC looking for a book to take with me home, and I came across a poetry book, and in it was Paul Laurence Dunbar's In the Morning. And it's a dialect poem. And Paul Laurence Dunbar is a Black poet who wrote at a time just after slavery. So many of the people that he was dealing with, like his mother, had been born into slavery, but they were slaves no longer. So the whole culture was still there, very fresh. And he wrote in dialect because that's what he heard. But he also wrote beautiful poems that were not dialect at all. Probably the earliest one was the one that was named Dawn, that my mother taught me at a very young age, that's only a few lines long, but shows the range of what it was that he could do. The thing I
Hmm.
came away with in looking at that book was that I couldn't understand what the dialect was. I didn't understand why I couldn't understand the words I was reading. And as it turns out, it was because it dawned on me it was dialect. It sounded like my grandparents. Now, I am today at 75 still a bibliophile. So if something was in a book to me, it was huge. Like, this is a thing. And it was my grandparents and then those who came before them that I was connecting with. And that connection with was profound when I realized what it was I was reading. It was like, this is my grandparents. Like, what? This
Mm.
is a thing. They're not just these people who sound like they're from the country and they don't sound like me. They were in Virginia and had been from North Carolina. I had grown up in the city in DC. So that was sort of the first time I ever thought about people being with me that weren't actually there, because that was so profound that I carry them in all the work that I do. And I can remember sitting down to write the first draft of the employment law textbook, which was, unprecedented. There was no path to follow on that. It was the first time they'd ever done a book like that. And I just remember them being so present with me and in a way, sort of cheering me on for doing what would become an entire academic discipline taught around the world to sort of make up for what it was that had happened to them. And that was amazing to me. It was like, you are our full circle moment. We went through what we went through. They had all been enslaved in North Carolina and Alabama.
Hmm.
Um, so you are sort of going full circle for us because you are teaching the world how not to look at people based on stereotypes and categories and instead look at them as full human beings, which is what
Hmm.
employment law sort of came out of, and DEI came out of that. So they always walk with me. And along the way, there have been all sorts of people that helped me, from my parents, who my dad was a minister. And I say my dad taught me how to get to heaven. My mother taught me how to live on earth. Because with my mother, she was no nonsense. She had a personality like I've never seen before. As a matter of fact, today would have been her 105th birthday, but she died when I was 20 years old, at
Hmm.
the age of 50. But my mother was the only person in the world I knew who could cuss you out so that you really understood what you had done wrong. And then you'd be hugging her the next second because she
Mm.
just went through the world that way. And my dad, what he did was really important because he taught me a lot of what it is that allows me to deal with the world the way I do and walk into rooms of perfect strangers that don't look like me and
Hmm.
teach them something that allows them to have that and carry it with them for the rest of their lives. Long after they forget where they got this from, they'll remember what it is that they learned about what they should be doing walking in through the world. And then, of course, I had heroes like probably somebody like Representative John Lewis. Oh my gosh, he just brings
Mm.
a smile to my face every time I think about him and what he went through for all of us without expecting anything in return. He
Yeah.
just did because it was the right thing to do, which is, it resonates so much with me because I feel the same way. I actually thought about that as you were giving the introduction and the comments after, because when you talk about me paving the way, it really is true. I brought the concept of not discriminating in a workplace, which then makes you think about not discriminating outside of the workplace. I brought that to academia And it was not an easy path to trot to be the first one to do that, especially in colleges of business, which tend to be very conservative, predominantly white, predominantly male. And here I was bringing this concept that you knew before you opened your mouth was going to make people think, well, of course you would say that. But it's like, is for all of us and to be who I am in that process. I don't look white. I don't look like a male. I don't have this very, sort of strict business kind of persona about me. And I had to go in and change minds. And that's what I did. But it formed the basis for the world to do what it then did. Now, people don't know that I did that. And that's fine with me. I could care less. If I wanted them to know, I would have been more obvious and open about it. What I care about is that the work be done. So you can not know that I've formed the basis for us to be able to have the discussions that we do in the world about diversity, but it's okay because we're having the discussions about diversity. And that's the part that I care about. And people that resonated with me that I walk into a room with are all people who felt the same way about that. And that is probably the biggest reason why I love John Lewis so, because it didn't matter to him who got the credit. What mattered to him was what happened. And
Yeah.
that's a huge piece of what it is I walk in the world with.
Yeah, as you were saying this, coming from the dancer world, I was somebody who always loved being the choreographer. Why I liked performing and I enjoyed it, I actually got more enjoyment watching the dancers perform the work that I choreographed and
Mm-hmm.
then getting the applause.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people don't remember who the choreographer was, they remember the dancer. And so for me, that like the work then it exponentially increases the number of people that it touched, right? Not just the dancers, but the people who watch it. So sticking on this conversation around the work you've done in employment law, when did you realize that you weren't just teaching an employment law course, you were actually creating an entirely new discipline?
Oh, from the beginning, because
Mhm.
there was nothing in the world about this, in our country about this. And remember, this is one of the reasons why our kind of leadership, whether we like it or not, is important across the world because people look to us for stuff like this. And this is one of the ways in which we change the world because of what we chose to do as a country in the area of Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that prohibits discrimination in the workplace on the basis of race, sex, color, religion, and gender, national origin. And then the world started to see it. And then when we went into DEI, which came from me because it was a natural offshoot of what I was doing with employment law, because I realized there wasn't enough to teach people the rules, the law. I'm a lawyer. That's what I would teach, right? It's a law class. But then I realized when they kept getting the answers wrong, that there was something else going on that I needed to deal with so that they would be able to protect their employers from
Mhm.
liability under Title VII. And I realized it came to me sort of in pieces, but I realized that what I was looking at was the gap between what I was teaching them and what was in their heads when they got ready
Mhm.
to make a decision that would implicate the law that I was talking about. So I could say you're not supposed to discriminate on the basis of gender. And they had somebody that was a potential hire and they ended up, in fact, this happened with one of my students, MBA students who was graduating and had done a year-long internship. When she went in to do the interview about whether she'd get the job or not, the actual offer, they lauded her to high heaven, told her what an incredible job she had been doing for the past year as an intern, and then said, you are so good that if you had been a male, we would have offered to pay you 50% more. And that is a huge, huge gap. Yeah, right. I mean, can you imagine? And there's so many stories like that. But that shows the gap between what that person knew, because I'm sure they knew this was a supervisor and this was not that many years ago. He knew that it was illegal to discriminate on the basis of gender. He did not realize when he was doing it because of the stuff that was in his
Right.
head, which clearly said that males have more um, everything than females do, certainly more value. and everything that's wrapped up in that, no matter how good the female is. So
Right.
that gap was what created for me DEI, which was I had to figure out a way to deal with not just the law, but deal with you and what's in your head that ends up being a part of that decision making process, which isn't about whether you hire 10 people or 12 people or they're from one group or another. It's about teaching you what's in your head, or really introducing you to what's in your head so that you can take that into consideration as you're making those decisions. That for me became a huge piece of what it was that was important to do. And because there was nothing beforehand that approached any of this in a college of business, I knew walking in the door, I knew when I was asked to come and create the course by the person who had headed up the Public Employee Relations Commission in New York and had retired to Florida. And he was teaching management, but he realized that maybe this was an opportunity for him to deal with something, or at least enable the dealing with something that he had seen the entire time he had headed up New York's Public Employee Relations Commission. And that is that if there were unfair labor practices based on race or gender that were brought forward by employees, that they were completely ignored.
Right.
Completely ignored. He didn't know what to do with them. The lawyers he had didn't know what to do with him. And when he retired and went to Florida and started teaching, he thought, well, maybe we can get somebody to create a course that can address this in some way. And his old assistant, who had been with him in New York, had then gone on to be the head of the Federal Labor Relations Commission in DC. So he called him up and said, this is what I want to do. Do you, in all of these lawyers that you have there, do you have anybody that you think you could send me? And that's where I came into the picture. I was
Got
walking
it.
to the hall one day and he asked to have me come to his office. I did. And he asked me if I'd be willing to teach, which I thought was sort of strange coming from the head of the agency. And I didn't even know he knew who I was. So why would he ask me about teaching? And he asked me about moving south. And I'm like, what is this? What is this conversation? And as it turns out, the rest of it was history. I did not want to do it. And I told him that. But I realized I was talking to the head of the agency and I had two young daughters whose mouths needed to be fed every day. So I needed to give him a yes very soon. And his next question was, would you allow me to send your resume along with others that I'm sending to my old boss to see if they can get somebody who would be willing to teach the course or create the course and then teach the course. So I walked in the door knowing that there was nothing there and I had to come up
Mhm.
with it. As a lawyer who did research, I realized fairly quickly that we were talking about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but this was 1982 and nobody knew what that law was or that
Princess.
pretty much even existed. So I was going from ground zero.
Mhm.
And what I didn't realize, as much as I just told you for the basis of what I was doing, what I didn't realize was how big it would become and how it would end up creating for the world a different way of dealing with human beings.
Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you for that and walking us down that history lesson, and somebody who was still very much in diapers when you were writing that textbook. Sorry for dating you. Yeah, but the laying the groundwork for that.
Or
So, okay, so we got to bring this story to you. We've been talking a lot about the work you've done for others, but I want to bring it back to Dr. VA. So take us to the specific moment when you thought, I belong here. Where were you and what shifted for you in that moment?
probably the first class that I taught with this, I realized, oh my God, people do not know this. And this is so important for them to know. And at that point, I was teaching both undergraduates and master's students. And the undergraduates were quite different because they're undergrads. I was teaching at a regional university, the University of North Florida at the time. And I taught there for 5.5 years before going to the University of Georgia for 33 years. And this very different kind of student body because a lot of them worked, but they were just sort of working their way through school. The master students were working during the day at legit regular jobs. Many of them were, supervisors, managers, And it was startling for me to realize that this law had been out there for all this time and they were operating totally in the dark about it and did
Really?
not know. And I realized very quickly how important it was for them to know because it would eventually catch on, and how important it was to not only know the law, but be able to walk their way through the law. It's one thing to say, thou shalt not kill. It's another thing to be faced at 3 o'clock in the morning with somebody who walks into your bedroom. What do you do? Or
Right.
to somebody walks out in front of your car and you end up killing them. What do you do? It's very different to live it. And remember, our country was coming from at its entire history. Its entire history. This is 2026. This is our 250th anniversary of a country. That was the Declaration of Independence. But we'd been around a long time before that, since the 1600s. The entire existence of this country, except for very few years in the beginning, had only treated particularly Black folks, which the Civil Rights Act was really made to include or address. They had treated them a certain way. And once slavery was over, that first beginning part was slavery, then there was 100 years of Jim Crow, and then you had this law that said all of a sudden you are supposed to treat these people that you've never treated this way before in life, even if they were free, a different way. You have to treat them like anybody else. How do you know how to do that? And that's what the 1964 Civil Rights Act did. It said you've now got to treat them like you treat anybody else. You can't discriminate the way you've done for the entire history of the country. And people simply did not know what that meant. So for me, being able to walk into that picture at some point and realize I was the one responsible for teaching people how to do this became a really important thing for me to do.
Mm.
So I realized that students couldn't, it wasn't enough to just teach them the law. I had to teach them sort of where this came from, why it was important to do, and what the consequences were if you did not do it, in addition to the value that it would bring to the country to treat the law as it was intended to be treated in the first place. That is, you're not just avoiding the legal consequences of violating the law, but you're getting a better world by treating everybody as if they have value that they bring to it, instead of just thinking about them in terms of some stereotypes that you may hold in your hand.
No, that's really, really important. And how are we making sure that our leaders understand that the work continues, right? Yes, we are in 2026. Sometimes it feels like we are in 1826 sometimes. But it's where we're at, and this is why we continue to do the work. So as we start to bring the recorded conversation to a close, because as we know, you and I know, we have these conversations a lot. Belonging requires care. What daily or weekly rituals, journaling, baking, fiber arts help you stay grounded and whole?
Life, and I
Mm.
mean in the broadest sense of the word that you can imagine. I thought about this when you said that we bring not only ourselves to work, but our work to our homes. There's probably not a minute in the day that I'm not thinking about this in some way, shape, or form. It's sort of like once your eyes are opened, you can't not think about it. I have three daughters. I have a
Mm.
granddaughter. I have a grandson, 19 and 15 years old. How could I not think about the world that I wanted them to be in, to do what I could as a mother, as a grandmother, to make that world better? I taught thousands and thousands and thousands of students. I have done work for thousands and thousands and thousands of attendees at sessions that I do. How could I not use that time to make them, for the time that we have together, think about the world in a different way that's going to enhance them as well as enhance the world? That's hard to turn off when you understand the importance of it. And when I say understand the importance of it, I was in New York last week doing the Black History Month keynote for the National African American Insurance Association. While I was there, I took the opportunity to meet with some of my students who lived in New York. I think one had graduated maybe in '06, one had graduated maybe in '09. And so these are people who've been out in the world for a while and they are in New York, which is no joke. As you well know, Mr. Dancer, okay, that is just a whole different place to be in when it comes to diversity. And plus, the person who, as it turns out, moderated the panel that I was on after I did the keynote was one of my old students from, I think he graduated in something like '06. All of my old students, and there were other students of mine in the audience, totally just random, right? And it was like, how does this even happen? But what they all said to me was how much, how impactful that course had been, not just for the course, but for what they ended up learning in life and carry with them to this day. Some of these are students I hadn't even seen since they graduated. And they were so struck by thinking about how much that time together, how much me breathing into them the idea of how they should go through the world resonated with them to this day. How could I not take that seriously? It always, even in the briefest of encounters, I want people to be, and we started with this, to be able to walk away thinking, this is possible. It is possible to, just in an encounter with somebody who's serving you a meal as a server, to make them feel elevated because of the few minutes that you
Yeah.
spent with them, letting them know you see them, you hear them, you think what they do has value. When we understand that the rest of the world looks at them as if they don't. You're just a person putting food on my table. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're a
Yeah.
human being much bigger than you putting this plate on the table for me. And I value that and want you to know that I value that. That's just sort of the way I go through the world. So for me, it never stops. There's not a daily ritual. There's not a monthly ritual or weekly ritual. It is what I do every minute of every day. And that's why I
I,
say, to me, it's all about love. You know, when we're on our deathbed, the last thing we're going to be thinking about is our job and whether we got as much money as we should or whether we wore a certain kind of clothing. We're going to be thinking about things that are surrounding love. Who's around me? Who do I care about? As I'm leaving this earth, what do I feel like I did that made the place a different, better place after I left? I mean, I think about this when I go to a public bathroom, even. Okay, I'm not going to leave it any worse than it was when I came in. And I'm probably
right.
going to better because I don't like seeing that tissue on the floor. So I'm going to pick that tissue up. Is it my job? No, it's not. But I know somebody's coming in with me or after I do, and they would not like to see that. So I make sure I take it up. That's
Right.
just the way I go through the world. And to me, what it does is it enhances the world, even though nobody knew who picked up that trash.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote that is sitting on my desk by Maya Angelou. I have learned that people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's how I live my life, right? Every interaction. I want people to walk away going, Christopher made me feel important,
Yeah.
loved, valued, right? That's so important to be able to do. Okay, Dr. BA, we have been having a wonderful conversation. However, we're going to have to bring this definitely into a close. So I have been asking all of my guests to finish the phrase, I know I belong when. So, Dr. BA, I know I belong when.
I can be in a space and feel valued for what it is that I bring to the table.
Mm, valued for what you bring to the table. That's really, really powerful. I also think about if the seat hasn't been created for you, just pull up your own chair and make sure you make space for yourself at the table too. Don't always be waited to be invited. Sometimes you just need to walk up and say, I'm here.
Here I
Well, my
am.
friends, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for helping us weave a conversation that reminds people that they are welcomed, valued, and loved. This has been a great reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. Friends, if this episode challenged you to move outside your comfort zone,
please follow our show and give us that 5-star review you know you want to give, and add a comment about what you will do to champion a culture of belonging. These actions will help to amplify the message to others so they too can find their own moment of belonging. Whether it is navigating the complexities of workplace culture, finding acceptance in a new school, building trust in a local community, or forging identities within our own families, these stories reflect the raw, honest, and unfiltered journeys each of us take every day. And we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, "I know I belong when," and send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening. Know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.